Chapter 1096 finally showed us the events of the God Valley flashback, but in what is once again an avalanche of details and hidden secrets, there are several key details you may not have noticed, such as some unexpected Rocks members including such as Shaki or Hiroluk, some God Knights who you may have missed, the national treasure of Pirate Island that is Kaido's fruit, the origins of the crew members from Bonnie's crew, and the race of the original Joyboy of the Void Century. So allow me to break down all of these details for you in this in-depth analysis. The chapter begins by showcasing the God Knights. It's unknown if all the God Knights are celestial dragons like Garling, but one of them mentions they want to seize the trophies for the Man-Mayor family. This is evidently the name of another celestial dragon family, meaning we finally have half the names of the 20 founders of the world government, including Nerona, Nefertari, Don Quixote, Jay Garcia, Marcus, Topman, Ethan Baron, Shepherd, Figarland, and now Man-Mayor. Speaking of the name Figarland, there is something that I think is worth bringing up, and it's the fact that some people told me that Figaro is the Greek word for moon, meaning that Figarland is most likely romanized as Figarland with an E, making their name the Moonland family quite literally. Given Erling's head being shaped like a moon, this seems very much intentional, so expect it to play a part down the line. Among the God Knights, there's a lot of bizarre designs, such as this girl with a hat bearing the world government logo, a kid with a gas mask, one wearing a ruff around his neck, and later also a lady with black hair, as well as a really bizarre design. He seems to not have a head at first, but I think it's actually more that he's wearing a cow skull helmet seen from the front, but regardless, this is an insanely cool design. Among the silhouettes, there are also some fascinating shapes too, including one seemingly wearing an Amigasa-like hat, one who is really tiny, and two of them with large horns of swords. Some of these look fairly young, with Garling even calling them kids, but this is likely done so that in the present, they will be all grown up and mature, ready to be veteran warriors that we may have to clash against at some point down the line. One final detail worth noting about them is that some of these God Knights bear quite a resemblance to some members of Carmel's House of Lambs, meaning that, could it be that Carmel sold some of these kids to the world government as God Knights? Well, no, this is basically impossible, since all the kids that match were there when Big Mom ate them all up during her birthday, but I guess they were technically there in God Valley, simply inside of Big Mom's stomach. Speaking of lookalikes, there's this fishman who helps free Ivankov, who you'd be quick to jump to the initial conclusion that I did as well, that he is Hack, the member of the Revolutionary Army, but again, that'd be impossible as Hack was born during the very year of this incident, making this just another coincidence of a fishman slave. We cut to Marineford, however, where Kong has a call with Garp. This confirms that Kong was in a high-ranking position already during the era of the Rocks, potentially Fleet Admiral already by the way he gives out orders, having lasted across all of Roger's era, all the way until the Great Pirate Era. Or in his dialogue with Kong, Garp mentions something very interesting. When Kong says that he can't exactly mention the details of the human hunt, likely due to celestial dragons wanting to keep such a thing private, just as the slavery was in Sabaody, Garp jokingly refers to it as the celestial dragon school trip, but then he follows up with, "I told you not to poke the beehive that is Hachinosu. You underestimate them. That thing is the treasure of Pirate Island after all. Of course they'd come back to take it." The way Gar mentions it, it appears that the Marines sought trouble with the Rocks by trying to seize a certain item from Hachinosu that is considered the Pirate Island's national treasure. The context seems to implicate that said treasure is now at God Valley, as even some of the Rocks pirates bring up retrieving a certain item. Particularly among them, Shiki and Big Mom say that whoever gets to it first gets to keep it, but Kaido remarks that it would be pointless in Big Mom's hands. This all seems to point to the idea that it's referring to Kaido's devil fruit, which Big Mom would successfully steal from Ivankov and later feed to Kaido since she already possesses a devil fruit herself. Interestingly, Captain John also makes mention of wanting to make it his treasure, which makes me wonder if it will tie in any way with his actual legendary treasure, as after all, beyond the dragon fruit and the paw fruit there were for other chests among the other prizes that some others could have taken as well. Still, a connection between Jebek and dragons is pretty fascinating, especially when we take into account the connection there is between Emu and dragons, with how the celestial dragons are named after the creatures, are fascinated with them, asked Vegapunk to create artificial dragons at Punk Hazard, and the void century ties between Emu and dragons in general. And since Rocksteady Jebek wanted to become king of the world and literally take Emu's position, one can only wonder why the two of them appear to be so incredibly similar and linked together. Things quickly escalate as the Rocks pirates invade the island, with Jebek himself leading the charge as he gets a few spoken lines, though doesn't appear on screen. And among the Rocks pirates, we have what is an incredibly stacked all-star cast. First, we have Whitebeard, who was 36 at the time. He expressed frustration with Jebek's recklessness and how everyone wanted to be captain, which can already be seen reflected here. On his hat, we even see a prototype version of his Jolly Roger that is different from his current one. Next is Miss Buckingham Stussy, the original pirate from whom the current Stussy was cloned, who is getting very cozy with Whitebeard as she would claim to be his lover in the future. Currently, the original Stussy has aged, while the clone has remained pretty identical to this Stussy here, supposedly due to her succubus fruit stopping her from aging. At this time, Stussy was 38 years old, and soon after this incident and the disbandment of the crew, she would begin freeloading at mats, which would lead to the creation of her clone. And interestingly, her kid Weevil, the supposed kid with Whitebeard, would be born 35 years ago, 3 years after God Valley. Maybe it has something to do with Mads and that whole cloning business? Next is Big Mom, who is currently 38 here, wielding Prometheus in hand and Mondor in her stomach as a baby. As we were told, she was able to get dragon fruit for Kaido, for which she considers him to owe her a debt of gratitude. Similarly, Kaido here is 21, having spent 6 years on the crew already. After him is Golden Lion Shiki, making his first proper full appearance in the actual manga, with the antagonist of Strongwall having been a historically famous pirate at the time. He appears to have already eaten his fruit at this time, as he states, "I'll send you all flying," which may not be a hyperbole, but meant quite literally. And next is quite the curveball, as Gloriosa is revealed to be a member of the Rocks Pirates. As a reminder, Gloriosa was the Empress of Amazon Lily and captain of the Kuja Pirates many years back. The one who succeeded her was Shakuyaku, Rayleigh's current wife, and owner of Shaki's rip-off bar. The one after her is an unnamed empress who ended up dying of love sickness, which was then followed by Hancock. Gloriosa mentioned how all empresses in these 4 generations were afflicted with love sickness, though only the one before Hancock died of it, as we mentioned. In Shaki's case, it was possibly Rayleigh, but I wonder if in Gloriosa's case, could it actually be one of the Rocks pirates instead? However, Gloriosa's presence here would actually explain a lot of things, as it's quite likely that both Gloriosa and Shaki operated together as members of the Rocks Pirates. In an SBS, Oda heavily teased readers about the fact that Shaki is an ex-member of the Rocks Pirates. However, she told us in the story she quit piracy 42 years ago to open up a bar at the Sapao de Archipelago and essentially retire, which she continues to this day. This explains her absence from the God Valley incident, but Gloriosa likely continued on the crew for a few years more after the two operated together for some time. This further lines up with how it was mentioned that Shaki and Gloriosa were together to help the Boa sisters return home after they escaped from Marijois, still keeping in contact after all these years as not just former empresses, but also fellow crewmates. We also should give a shout out to Kurozumi Higurashi, as she was confirmed to have been involved with the Rocks during Kaido's flashback, something that was also supported by the fact that she had the face of a young Shiki in her Mani Mani no Mi repertoire, but she isn't present here, meaning that either she left the crew already or just isn't present for some other reason. Finally, adjacent to Gloriosa is Captain John, the famous pirate who left a legendary treasure behind but eventually died of mutiny when his crew killed him for not revealing the location of his treasure to anyone. His corpse was then later pillaged by Moria, who revived it as one of his general zombies, and his treasure would remain unfound for many years, with Buggy currently looking after it with the armband that Luffy gave him during Impel Down. But speaking of zombies, John wasn't the only one. There was a lot of speculation for a while that some of the other zombies from Thriller Bark were other members of the Rock's Pirates, and the guess appears to be perfectly correct, as we can actually see some of them matching here, such as the pirate with the large helmet and beard being identical to the general zombie that appeared with John at Thriller Bark, which a lot of people speculated this to be Ochoku, since the pirate he was inspired by in our real history, also known as Wang Zi in Chinese culture, similarly had a long beard, but this is impossible as Ochoku had been ruling Hachinosu until Blackbeard defeated him in the Rocky Port incident during the timeskip. So while this pirate isn't Ochoku, regardless, he's clearly a member of the Rock's Pirates that became a zombie that Moria later resurrected, and he's not the only one either here. Above Whitebeard there's a pirate with 3 claws for his hand, which match with another one of the general zombies of Thriller Bark who sported similar appearance and weaponry, and you could perhaps make some connections with some of the other Rock's Pirates as well. All this connection between Thriller Bark and God Valley, however, sparks a sudden question. What if potentially the two islands could be one and the same? What if God Valley vanished from the map because the island literally became a moving island, which was reformed into Thriller Bark, the moving Phantom Island? And this would match up perfectly because Thriller Bark originated in the West Blue, the same ocean God Valley was in. That said, some things don't fully add up, as Mori was still 12 years old at the time, so it's hard to say if this is yet another coincidence or if there really could be some truth behind this. To round up the Rock's Pirates, you can actually spot Streusen in the corner, who evidently has been accompanying Big Mom as her right-hand man ever since the foundation of the crew. At this time of the incident, he would already be a whopping 54 years old, making him one of the oldest members of the crew, as Streusen is actually the current oldest human in One Piece at age 92, excluding the bizarre case of Kureha and her perennial youth, of course. There is another pirate that appears silhouetted, however, someone that appears to be sporting a top hat, who we can actually see separately further in the back right beside Kaido. This could be just some other generic pirate like the one with the long beard, but I have an outlandish theory regarding him. Given the top hat, could this potentially even be a young Hiruluk? He didn't mention being an outlaw around 40 years ago until he found the Sakura Mountain in the west 37 years ago, 1 year after this incident, after which he decided to return home to Drum as his health was finally cured. Could this have been him during that time, being an outlaw who found this mountain in the west after fleeing God Valley in the west and going back home? Well, it could be possible, but there is one weird inconsistency, being the fact that this top hat character, weirdly enough, seems to possess 4 arms, though it's also possible that the one seen besides Kaido and the one in the panel below are different characters altogether. As a final bonus, the one pirate beneath him looks somewhat similar to Wellington, the washed-up pirate captain from North Blue that Doflamingo ended up killing during his flashback, but this could be just a coincidence since his appearance is rather generic. However, on the other hand, we have the Roger Pirates, which include Goldie Roger at age 39, Silver's Rayleigh at age 40, Scupper Gaban, Millet Pine, Spencer, Yui, and Sunbell. Roger himself looks like a splitting image of Ace, and also appears to be wearing the famous straw hat still. He mentions how it's been 1 year, which could be in reference to how a year prior, Roger had made it to Lodestar, the final island of the Grand Line route, and had now continued his journey to locate the poneglyphs and find the real final island. Yet another third party joins the fray, however, as Garp's reinforcements hit the scene, with a 40-year-old Garp emitting Haki lightning from his fist in a battle that will crown him as hero of the Marines. Alongside his side, however, is the ever-loyal Bogard, who, all things considered, looks quite great despite his age, as this flashback indicates he must be at least around 60 years old in the present. In one of the most tragic and emotional One Piece moments, however, however, the God Valley flashback is off-screen, as we skip ahead to Kuma's return to a normal life in the Sorbet Kingdom. Ivankov makes a quick mention of Morgans, who was already active at the World Economic Newspaper at quite a young age too, since he would have been 15 back then. And as a cool detail, when Ivankov bids goodbye to Kuma and Ginney, Kuma mentions that he'll never forget a face like Ivankov's, which makes it all the more painful when in Marineford, Kuma has had all his memories erased and Ivankov begins crying at the fact that Kuma has forgotten his face and now treats him like an enemy. We get to find out that Kuma's family seemingly lived at a church, which finally explains to us why Kuma always carried a Bible with him, as he appeared to be a man of religion. Though I wonder if his adoration of the sun god was the focus of this religion or something complementary to it. However, Kuma's vision of religion seems to be more focused on a pious path of kindness and selflessness, as we even see him healing the wounds of other kids later on, like some sort of miraculous prophet. As we expected, Ginney stays behind with Kuma to eventually become Bonnie's mother, and the two begin a new humble life in the Sorbet Kingdom. Ginney usually speaks with the pronoun uchi, which is common to the Kansai region of Japan, giving her a very friendly speech pattern, and she refers to Kuma with the adorable nickname of Kumachi. Kuma refers to her as a big eater, which is an allusion to Bonnie's epithet, with their hunger seemingly running in the family. Together the two, and by two I mean mostly Kuma, work hard gathering wood, just as we saw in the drawing of a kid Kuma, which, as I mentioned last video, is a reference to a Japanese symbol of rising the ranks through hard work. This will result in Kuma becoming king and getting to raise Bonnie in the Sorbet Kingdom, before he would be driven out as a tyrant. Speaking of Bonnie though, interestingly we see two kids who decide to follow Kuma in this chapter, and these are fairly relevant as they'll eventually become members of Bonnie's crew, taking care of Kuma's daughter when she sets sail as a pirate to the ocean. Before we wrap up though, I want to bring up a detail regarding Kuma that arose during his confrontation with Saturn. As the Gorosei told Kuma that he was always meant to be born a slave, a concept that Kuma simply can't get behind being born right or wrong, something fascinating is mentioned, as Kuma tells him that just like Nika, he wants to become someone who can save people, and Saturn replies, "That is exactly why your people must be erased." What this sentence seems to be implying is potentially the idea that the original Joyboy user of the Void Sentry may in fact have been a buccaneer. That is likely the crime that their people brought to the world, burying the user of the Nika fruit among their people, which resulted in the first Joyboy turned reality, which the world government would then condemn his entire race in order to avoid any other Joyboy from arising ever again. This would make a lot of sense, as it would explain the mysterious hat found in Marie-Joie. A lot of fans have often mistaken this hat for the hat of a giant, but that is sort of impossible as One Piece giants are way bigger, like way bigger. The hat would have to be at least 3 to 4 times the size to actually fit an actual 20-meter plus giant. However, it is still slightly larger than a normal human, but for a buccaneer, it would be a literal perfect fit. This might even explain better the name of the race, as evidently the ancient kingdom was closely tied with the concept of pirates, if not mostly composed by pirates altogether, so it makes sense that the original Joyboy was part of a race literally named after real pirates. Saturn, witnessing Kuma mentioning wanting to be like Nika, likely rose his suspicions again, but ultimately the government is missing the fact that becoming Joyboy by being chosen by the fruit isn't really something race dependent, which is why even a human like Luffy can now become Joyboy. Becoming Joyboy is not a matter of blood or birthright, a notion that Saturn clearly falls victim of because he believes all to be born right or wrong, with Kuma being born to be a slave and him being born to be great, but living up to the name of the character of Joyboy is simply a matter of wishing to deliver liberation, to inherit the ancient will of freedom, and to be able to make such massive dreams a reality.